Welcome to Evolve to Succeed, the podcast that brings together entrepreneurs, founders, business leaders and experts to talk about their journeys and explore the link between personal and business success. I'm your host, Warren Munson, founder of Evolve, a coaching, training and development company focused on enabling business and personal success and creating a community of like-minded individuals. Whether that be through our peer groups, one-to-one coaching, our training and development programs for you and your teams, or through our content and events, our mission is to get the best out of each individual and inspire them to be better both in life and in business. If you want to learn more about Evolve, including our beautiful co-working space in Ashley Cross in Poole, then please go to evolvemembers.com, where you'll find great content, insights, details of all of our services, and also information on our forthcoming events. For now though, let's get on with the show. Welcome to this week's episode. This week's conversation is with Justin Hedges OBE, who is the founding partner and executive chairman of Prevail Partners, an intelligence, strategic advisory and risk management company. Justin was also one of the youngest Royal Marine Brigadiers ever. He retired from the Royal Marines and Specialist Military Units in 2018 and was awarded his OBE for his outstanding leadership in operations. His deep insights into strategic and operational plans, drawn from top roles in the UK's national security architecture, clearly give him tremendous authority on the subject of leadership, risk management and crisis response. I was excited to get him on the show to discuss these subjects and to hear his opinions on the similarities between leading in the military and leading a company in the commercial world, how he has transitioned to his new entrepreneurial life, his struggles with delegation, and much, much more. Please do enjoy the episode. Welcome, Justin, to the Evolve to Succeed podcast. I'm really interested today to have a conversation with you about all things to do with your journey, your military career, as well as your current position at Prevail Partners. You retired in 2018 from the Royal Marines, where you were one of their youngest ever brigadiers, and you've been on a very interesting trajectory since that's clearly led you to where you are today. So it's kind of a very broad opening question that gives our listeners a bit more background and understanding of where you've come from. I'd like to find out about how all that time in the military informed your character and made you who you are today.
No, thank you. I mean, I, as you said, served 28 years in the end, but decided to join the Marines when I was early mid-teens. And throughout that time, it was obvious at the start, but became more, clear that the high levels of commitment, hard work, and teamwork required to succeed, not just as an individual, but more importantly, within the teams that you were operating, at varying levels. I was fortunate enough to command large numbers of people and take them on operations, and at the same time work at a senior level in London in the Ministry of Defence and Whitehall, and those are sort of consistent themes: hard work, good planning and preparation, and actually also the importance of looking after those that aren't directly involved, but for example, the families, wives, parents, children, because when you take people away on operations or send people away on operations, then there's a lot of other people that need to be kept happy.
Yeah, it's a broad family, isn't it, the military?
Yeah, that's right. That's slightly jokey saying, but we say, happy wife, easy life. Yeah. And there's a little element of truth in that, because people are in the military, certainly the units I served in, spend a lot of time away, some of that at risk, and you really need to carefully husband those families, look after them, show them leadership as well, to make sure that they remain supportive of their husbands or their wives doing what they're doing.
And that must be challenging, isn't it? Because you're dealing with that daily pressure of operational challenges, and then you're also dealing with that broader kind of leadership piece. And particularly, I suppose, when you're on a military camp and everybody's there all the time together, is there any respite?
Well, when you are the sort of the top man on the camp, which I was for 2.5 years, I think we had 1,000 people on camp, and then sort of families on top. That there isn't, but myself and the people before me and after me, you sort of grow into the role quite quickly. You do feel like you're the dad. I mean, it's a really strange thing to say, bearing in mind there were some, very senior, long-serving people, older and wiser than me that were part of my unit. But I was the dad, and I in a way, emotionally, felt responsible of my children and everything, their successes, their failures, the risks, the training and education, and every aspect of that. But you thrive in it and enjoy it.
And did your leadership style change during the course of your career? Because obviously, leadership training within the forces is renowned. But at some point, do you develop your own style? Because I'd imagine as you come out of that training and you're a newly appointed officer, that's kind of one way of doing it. And there's a little bit of freedom, but you're kind of doing it the way you're taught. Did your leadership style change as a result of your time?
It certainly evolved. I think it's fair to say that all of the training and education and leadership that's done within the military gives each individual the set of tools. But for each and every one of us, you apply those slightly differently. I mean, I think one of my strengths, and I will have had many weaknesses, but one of my strengths is I formed, I think, quite a successful communication method, which was sort of a contrived thing, but I used to love sitting down with the guys and girls in a very informal way and just talking with them, whether that was away on operations or in the unit. I'd spend at least 50% of my time really just talking to people. Oh, what are you doing? What are you working on? Most of the time, I was actually wanting to know what they were sort of producing for me. So they were sort of like, right, what are you working on? How's it going? This, that, and the other. But in almost all occasions, that would then just evolve and me giving a little bit of an explanation about what the priorities were as far as I saw it, what the politics were, what was going on in the international stage in the Middle East, or whatever it might be. But that I think for me became my most successful means of keeping the team that I was responsible for moving in the one direction, and my method of inspiring them to do their jobs.
Yeah. It's that communication is everything, isn't it? In any walk of life, when you're leading people, isn't it? I mean, you can be in that ivory tower and be isolated.
That's right. You've got to be out there, and there are many good people that are very good at standing up in front of an audience in a set format. That's one tool, but then it's the slightly more sit round the campfire and have the listening ears on as well, and engage on the issues that people want to talk about, because they're not always what you want to talk about.
Definitely some good hints and tips there. And one of the things I'm in awe of is, I've led businesses, I've led, organisations, but, they're commercial. They're not life and death situations. You've come out of the military world now and are leading a commercial entity. And obviously, when you reflect back now, what difference did it make to you when you were leading in situations which were life and death?
Well, that's a difficult question, because I feel today in the private sector almost equal levels of responsibility, because there are people we employ and therefore we're putting money in their pockets to feed their families. We have clients that range from UK government departments through to some quite big industrial clients that are looking for us to provide an important service, and therefore, in a way, certainly on the actual sort of private security side, we've got, we look after the security of executives around the world in varying places. They're putting their trust in us to make sure their
the world hasn't much changed.
Well, certainly for part of our business, it doesn't feel like it has. But there's one very common thread between both, and that is I get up in the morning wanting to make sure that what we're doing is a success, and therefore how am I going today to give the right direction, give the right inspiration and advice to make sure people are going to do well at what they do.
Yeah, no, definitely. And again, talking about your career, I suppose the other one that interests me, and perhaps it's that piece around, you commanded and led sort of, routine units, and obviously some specialist elite units as well. Did your leadership style have to change and be different between the two?
In the more specialist units, because of the high degree of selection and training and experience, the leadership style and decision making involved more collaboration all the way through the rank system. A lot of gathering round a map, discussing what we were, what the intelligence was and what we were about to do and how to do it. In a more conventional unit, there'd probably be less of that. I mean, that collaboration would be done in a smaller forum across a headquarters with the troops less involved in that. So leadership style evolves subtly, and back to the sort of listening ears, it was essential that you could take account of how people thought things should be done, and either address that by saying, I understand what you're saying, but actually we're going to do something else, or say, yeah, great point. That's a smarter point than I've come up with. Let's make sure we take that into account.
So definitely a more collaborative approach, but your general style wouldn't have been any different.
No, not really. That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, you always look to the military as a great example of, where great leadership does take place. So is there anything you've witnessed during your time within the Royal Marines where you think that was incredible, leadership?
I think the first thing I'm going to say to that is the reverse. Okay. And that is poor leadership, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course it is.
Because there's one thing that I saw on several occasions, and sometimes from some quite senior officers, and that this was avoiding taking responsibility when something hasn't gone well.
Okay.
And in military operations, or and the military in general, not everything goes well all of the time. And I think one of the most unseemly or worst aspects of leadership I've seen is when senior people take a really big step back into the shadows and allow blame to roll down to the junior level, when actually the best leadership I've seen is when people, although many factors might have been involved, have really stepped forward, put their hand up and said, actually, the buck stops with me.
I'm the leader.
I'm the leader. I'm responsible. And, face your charge, place the responsibility at my door, and protecting junior people that, to be frank, hadn't got out of bed that morning thinking I'm going to make a mistake or wanting to make a mistake.
Nobody does, do they?
But stuff happens. Yeah. And yes, there might have been factors around poor planning or whatever, but at the end of the day, I think one of the most important characteristics of a good leader is the willingness to take responsibility when you are the one that's responsible.
Definitely. Yeah, I absolutely concur with that, and I suppose, did you see, I suppose leading on from that, and it wasn't something I thought I was going to ask, but in corporate, in larger corporate organisations, it can get very political, can't it? He said, she said. There's all political games that are played. Do you find that in the military as well, or is it more direct style of, subservient leadership?
Oh, there's definitely a bit of he said, she said. I think the higher up organisations get, and the closer people get to the rarefied atmosphere of being at the top, the more slippery and very conscious of their own image people become. I think. I mean, that's not true of everybody.
No.
But I think if people feel that one misstep might cost them the next promotion to the next senior position, the more attention they pay to not being seen to have made a misstep. Okay. So, human nature. People are, still worry about how they're perceived.
Definitely. So, why was the decision made after 28 years of great service and obviously a very enjoyable career? Why was the decision made to leave the military, Justin?
Loved every minute of it. Couldn't recommend military service highly enough to anybody. But I think I just reached a point where I was done, loved it, but I felt that I didn't want to be my entire life to be defined by one thing only. Okay. And I looked up at at how the sort of next few years would be, and I thought, I'm a 45-year-old young brigadier, and actually I'm going to have to my next logical decision point to leave, I'd be sort of 55, and therefore quite a different, different options would be available. And I fancied, giving it a go myself.
Wow. So, as a result, you formed Prevail Partners. So perhaps, tell our listeners a little bit about what Prevail Partners does. Justin.
So I founded Prevail Partners with a colleague of a similar background, Damien, and we set out to form a boutique specialist defence and security company. So we sort of do three things. We provide advisory services, so operational support, planning and decision-making support to both UK government departments and some private clients. There's a private security aspect to that. So, for example, in Ukraine, we have managed the security and extractions of people during the opening days of the conflict, and we provide quite a lot of broad security assistance out there, ranging from hostile environment training through to VIP or executive security and other things. The second ring on the Venn diagram, we provide intelligence, and that ranges at the lower end from classic due diligence through investigations, and we provide what I say is fully fused intelligence reporting for governments and private sector clients. And one of those clients, probably worth mentioning, we work for a number of NGOs that do counter-trafficking and other investigations in Africa. And so there's a sort of NGO aspect to that, NGO aspect to all of it. And then the third bit is capability advice. We work with providers of unmanned air systems and technology to try and to collaborate to improve capabilities to offer into defence and security sector. And there's one bit of work in relation to the NGO sector we're doing at the moment, is we are building a secure data architecture on behalf of counter-trafficking in NGOs in Africa. So that's in wow. Choice of a sort of best way of describing it, would provide a front-end platform where investigators could dial in through a secure network and use our data and tools to help with their investigation. So it's quite a broad frontage. We're about 55 employees now, headquartered out of Victoria, and have some great clients and every day it's a hard ride.
That is a very broad church of offerings and services, isn't it?
It is. Some days it definitely feels like too wide, but as you and other business people will recognise, it's about picking a team, choosing the specific team for a specific task. And I think if you boiled what Damien and I do, really boiled it down, our expertise and what we do is build specialist task forces of experts to address the sort of challenge or what we're being asked to do.
And then it's back to your probably military days of leading that
and leading the high
and
performing team.
Yeah,
that's right.
Managing and resource. So was there a moment for you and Damien when you started this business where, you'd both come out of the military, with all of that support, all of that infrastructure, and maybe you were just sat in a room together thinking, what have we done?
That is a very, very apt point. And we had some, like every business that starts, some pretty dark days. First of all, trying to work out how to use a photocopier, make your own coffee, all of these challenges that, us old senior officers had. But practically, the world of commercial and government, when people are looking for a job to be done, they do like to see a supplier that has some form of track record. Yeah. Now, we had no problem convincing people of our own individual...
Your integrity, your credibility.
Absolutely. Yeah. But as a commercial entity, different question. And of course, about 18 months after we really started, we had a very good contract out in the Middle East, and we were in discussions of extending that, and we thought, fantastic, the space shuttle's about to leave the atmosphere, and the COVID curtain came down, and all international travel stopped, and everything just sort of stopped dead for us. So we did what we do best, is get back round the drawing board. What of what we're offering can we do during this period of time? We doubled down a lot in the intelligence area, stayed alive, stayed engaged, and then over the last 18 months since the beginning of last year, had a number of useful breakthroughs. And I think now we've got some very big, serious clients on the government side, but also on the private side. It looks like we have just landed a contract to provide security services to a company that employs 110,000 people and turns over 30 billion. And we won that contract ahead of some of the big names in the security industry because they believed that we would offer a better service. So really hard yards, requires perseverance and stamina, which I think are two of the qualities of success in any walk of life.
Yeah, no, definitely, and definitely two sort of qualities that you learn, I'm sure, having been in the military.
You do.
So now seeing kind of the commercial world in its kind of reality, do you believe that military approach to managing people, leadership, what does transcend really well into the world of business? And what could our listeners that run businesses perhaps learn and implement from the military world?
I think there's a common service that's offered from ex-military people to the private sector, which I think is right, and that is just rigorous planning. What the military does do, because it has hundreds of people employed on a day-to-day basis, is good planning. There are tried and tested tools that have been developed ever since the British Army was formed by Cromwell, and before, the legacy of doing that. And I think we are asked to and provide that sort of support. There are lots of other entities out there run by really good military people that what they do is help commercial companies of varying sizes to conduct that sort of planning and bring that in. So I think that's one thing that definitely comes across and is sort of needed in the private sector.
But the counter to that, do you think, if you're, maybe not in your instance, but maybe in others coming out of the military, probably think and overthink and plan, especially in the early days of a business where sometimes you've just got to be entrepreneurial, you've got to see the opportunity and you've got to take the first step.
I think if it asked me, well, what can the military learn from the commercial side, I would say risk taking.
Yeah.
Because I think what you've put your finger on is where, people that succeed in business, use their business instincts better and are more willing to take calculated risks on less planning than, say, a military person would do.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I'm a believer in one thing though, and that is instincts aren't something you're born with. You have an instinct about a certain environment, whether that's instinctive decision making in the military or instinctive decision making in building a software, because actually you've got a lot of underpinning knowledge and experience in that industry. So when the leader of a private company, walks in the office and said, right, today we're going to do X, and we're going to go for it because my instinct is saying that's what we should do. That's probably the case because he or she's layered up so much knowledge and experience. They wake up in the morning with a light bulb and going, it's the right time. So yes, I agree with you.
It's interesting, isn't it? Again, I sort of got off at a tangent, but you also then, I agree with you then, a lot of, that gut feel, that gut instinct isn't something you're born with. It comes through experience, but then you have the other end with very young entrepreneurs, founders, who've got nothing to lose. Yeah. And they just will take the risk, won't they?
Well, I think if you've got nothing to lose, you've got nothing to lose, have you? When you get to my age with the responsibilities of family, you have to be a little bit more calculating.
Well put. You've also been awarded an OBE, so congratulations. That must be a great honour. Has that had any noticeable and significant impacts on your life, perhaps both professionally and personally?
Not directly in the way you maybe the question was framed. I can remember at the time when I was told I was given the honour on the back of an operational tour out in Afghanistan. I was told, I was obviously felt proud and delighted. At the same time, within the task force that I was lucky enough to lead, there were about 5 or 6 others that were given, awarded national recognition. And 6-9 months after that, we all were lucky enough to go to Buckingham Palace and be given our honours by the Queen. I think when the sort of dust settled, I think the most important aspect was the sense in my own mind, and actually more broadly in the team that were out there with me, that it really recognised that we had collectively done a good job. We had been given a mandate and we had succeeded against that, and so it was more a sense of satisfaction that we had done well.
Job well done.
Job well done. That's right. I mean, I think outside of that, every now and then somebody, you have a business meeting or something, and the person you're meeting for the first time, comments on it.
Yeah.
And that that helps with getting in the door.
It's that integrity and credibility.
Yeah, I
piece
think
again,
that's
isn't it?
right. You know, it's not unhelpful, but of course, once you get into the room, you have to
You've got to prove yourself all
you have
over
to
again.
convince them that you can actually do what you're saying you're going to do.
So, experience in leadership, we've had a great conversation around it during the course of this conversation, but what do you think are your 5 most important qualities of a great leader, Justin?
Compassion. And I say compassion because when leaders lead and make decisions, then there are consequences somewhere. And I think when you make those decisions and give that direction, you have to appreciate with compassion the consequences of those decisions. I think the second thing I put my finger on, back to the planning side, depending on the level, the scale of the consequences, is making sure you've done the sufficient preparation and planning, for choice of a better word, that is in due regard for the potential consequences. I can. And that what you're doing is aligned to what you're doing. I mean, not my story really, but I became very great friends with an American who became an extremely senior officer in the US Armed Forces, and he had been part of the American team that went into Mogadishu on the day that's gone down as the sort of Black Hawk Down scenario. And he just sort of made a comment to me but one of the jobs of the leaders in the military was to make sure that when you place the lives of people at risk, that is absolutely aligned to the policy objectives, and you're not just going out to do something because you think it'll be it's just worth doing. It's got to be fully aligned. I think the third thing is being prepared to listen. I think the best leaders allow enough time and genuinely listen to what they're being what's being said to them.
Otherwise, it's a dictatorship, isn't it?
Well, that's right.
In a way, if all you do is force your opinions on others, it's dictatorship.
And we've all come across leaders, I think, that are very good at not speaking while people are speaking to them, but then actually not listening to what's being said. I think back to your very good fourth one, a very good point about business leaders, and that is, I think, being prepared to take calculated risks when it's the time to take those risk decisions. And then the fifth and final one we've touched on before is good communication. The more people understand about what the big picture is and where they fit into it, and what they're about to do and how that contributes, the easier it is for people to really commit to it and get on with what you're doing.
Great. 5 great qualities there. Yeah, if we could all demonstrate those day in, day out, we could all succeed, couldn't we? But all of them are hard to do and deliver consistently day in, day out, aren't they?
They are, yeah. Every day's hard. Yeah. Hard work, but good hard work. Yeah. Good hard work.
Definitely. And I suppose a little bit of reflection then now for you, 4 years post the military career, being in the commercial world, if you could go back to the day you left the military and say to yourself, there's one thing you're going to need to learn, there's one thing that's going to need to change, what would that be, Justin?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think the area I'm struggling with more today than I did in my latter years in the military is delegation. I mean, I think I had got to, certainly in my mind, a pretty good place of delegating and trusting the people around me in the military. But there was a huge infrastructure of training and education and layers of checks and balances that meant that actually when you when you just gave a bit of direction, effective delegation, you would be it would be sort of followed through. I think what I've found in the business world, and although the company has evolved to have a little bit of size to it now, every decision feels like you own it from soup to nuts, and therefore balancing delegation with supervision and trying to not drift into micromanagement is an area that I'm really struggling with at the moment.
Yeah, well, that's a very honest answer. But I suppose part of it is natural, isn't it? Because when you're in the military, you have the structures there, isn't it? When you and Damien started the business, two of you, built it to 55 people already, which is great. But you haven't naturally got the structure, have you?
You don't have the structure, and we've got some of that company infrastructures being built all of the time, but still.
But it's piecemeal, isn't it?
It's piecemeal.
Not there, ready printed.
No, that's it.
You move up, you know what you need to delegate. It must be. I can see that as a very honest answer, because I can see that being a real challenge. Yeah, definitely. And looking back, obviously now out of the military, but that time in the military, how did it affect your family life and your personal life, and have you been able to see a significant change coming out the other side?
I think the benefits of the new life is that I have much more control over my diary. Yeah. In the latter stages of my military career, and what I would have had in the coming years was effectively long-term weekly commuting to and from London principally, was what my last 4 years was, and what the sort of future would have held. Now I get sort of much more control over that, which means I can invest more in them. I mean, I think for all of us that are family people, we want to see our children succeed, and I can spend a bit more time coaching them at sport or advising them or whatever. I mean, they sometimes get grumpy dad when the work pressure's on, and they'll roll their eyes, but that's all part of growing up, isn't it?
It's all part of life, isn't it? I suppose the rich tapestry of life, definitely. And looking back now, the best piece of advice that you've ever received, Justin?
I think two pieces of advice that I've received that I would sort of pass on. First of all, get back up on your feet, dust yourself down and go again. I think Churchill once said that success is not final, failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts. And then the second one, which I think is universal, be good to people, and for they will be good to you.
Yeah, both are great, but I love that final one. If there's an adage to live your life by, that would be it, wouldn't it? So as we wrap up the podcast, always end with the kind of final question around success, and that kind of feeling of what does success mean to you, Justin?
Successful, happy family, but I think from a business success perspective, we feel that we have a unique offering that can have a sort of positive impact in a range of areas. And if we succeed with the business, it means that we've probably delivered some impactful stuff that could benefit in everything ranging from counter trafficking in Africa through to helping a industrial partner going back into a place like Ukraine to rebuild it, because we've given them the confidence that they can return.
Brilliant, fantastic. If people want to learn more about you, Justin, and Prevail Partners, where can they go?
Prevail-partners.com is our website. It's currently being updated. We're on LinkedIn, and be delighted to take any questions or follow up from anybody out there.
Perfect. Justin, I've loved having you on the podcast. It's been a great, broad discussion, featuring on leadership but covering so much else. Thank you for being a great guest on the Evolve to Succeed podcast.
Warren, thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you for listening to the Evolve to Succeed podcast. My hope with every episode is that you've learned something new or heard something that challenged your way of thinking and further motivated you on your path towards becoming a more knowledgeable, informed and inspired individual and business leader. If you enjoyed this episode, then please help us by rating, reviewing and subscribing. We really value your feedback and would love to have you along for future episodes. And please don't forget to learn more about Evolve by going to evolvemembers.com. Thank you for listening. See you next week.